of studies that we're going to do on land. It kind of coincides with the theme of listening to creation, but it's really a very important kind of theme in the Bible, and some would argue that it's kind of the overarching, the main theme of the Hebrew Bible, the question of land, and it's also a kind of very contemporary theme. It's a hugely important issue in Israel-Palestine, and it's the questions, things that we'll be looking at are at the root of some of the major conflicts that are taking place in the conflict that's taking place in Israel-Palestine. But the question of ownership of land and possession of land, it applies to the situation in Ukraine at the moment. It kind of underlines the question of migration, who owns a land and who has the right to occupy a land, who has the right to be in a land, and also, the question of care of the land, who cares for the land and how is it cared for. So these are kind of really, really crucial contemporary issues, but they're also, theological, and they're issues for understanding. We need to come to these issues from the perspective of faith, and how do we understand these, as Christians, as believers. And Neil's just joining us, by the way. There he is. So I'll just do a little introduction, and then we can look at a couple of passages today. Hi, Neil. We look at a passage from Isaiah chapter 5, just 10 verses from that, and then we look at 1 Kings chapter 21, which is a nice story about possession and ownership of land. But I'll just do a kind of quick preliminary of some of the basics of the theology of land. Somebody called Walter Brueggemann, a theologian, said that the biblical narrative is in three parts: land promised, land lost, land restored. And that's the kind of story of the people of Israel. That the land was promised to them, they achieved it, they got into the land, the land became theirs, and then they lost it. They were taken into exile, and then they brought back and came back. So it's a three-part narrative. And then we might want to ask later on in the series, what happened to that when we move into the sort of New Testament kind of era. But just kind of basics now. This is just from the creation stories. This is just from the very first chapter. Shall I read it, or somebody like to read it? Yeah, you'll read it.
Sure. All right. So, cool. Love a bit of Genesis. God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work he had done in creation.
So immediate observation that God creates the land. I mean, God creates everything that there is, the whole of creation, and it is good. And that's the kind of fundamental kind of thing that you see, that the land is good and creation is good, and that the rest, the Sabbath rest, also, I mean, we see later on in the Bible that the Sabbath rest applies to the land as well, everything. That's just a fairly obvious observation, the first opening chapter, if anybody wants to comment, or we would just move on.
Well, this beautiful creation was given to Adam, and from him was created Eve, and they got it a bit wrong.
That's right, Andy. You've got it. Just move on. I mean, this is the next one, the next verse. Did you read that, Harry?
By all means. That's a really bad reference to Paul. In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground, but a stream would rise from the earth, and water the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being.
And just read this next one. This next verse comes from after the expulsion from Eden.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're jumping forward a bit. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. You are dust, and to dust shall return. That's pretty telling.
That's pretty telling, yes.
Exactly what happens. I mean, maybe that's why we bury people.
Yeah. But I mean, it says something right at the very start about the relationship between human beings and the land. Human beings.
That verse is often used in traditional burial services: ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Yes, it is. It is. But I mean, I think what you're getting, what you're seeing there is that absolutely intimate relationship between humanity and the land. That we're not somehow or other over and above and separate from it. We are created from it, and our relationship to the land is absolutely integral.
And in the Jewish scriptures, there seems to be a lot more one-to-one conversation between humans and God than we see in the New Testament.
Yes, there is. Okay, so then that this intimate relationship between land and the earth and humanity, but then that kind of gets narrowed down to a relationship with a particular land, with a particular piece of land. And let's have a look at that. Go back to where we were. Somebody else like to read this? This is again from Genesis, but this is the promise, the covenant that's made to Abraham. Any volunteers? Well, there you are. Go on for it. Go on then.
Yes, unmute.
Is it me?
It seems like.
All right. Sorry. So I said I wouldn't. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a deep and terrifying darkness descended upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, "Know this for certain, that your offspring shall be aliens in a land that is not theirs, and shall be slaves there. And they shall be oppressed for 400 years, but I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. As for yourself, you shall go to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried in good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun had gone and it was dark, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites.
Right. So that's something very, very particular. I mean, that's a very kind of different kind of relationship that now develops. And I don't know, does anybody else have any kind of thoughts or hesitations about that passage?
This takes us right through to the end of Deuteronomy, where Moses had been promised he would lead the freed Israelites to the promised land, but he wouldn't set foot in it himself. And that task fell to Joshua. But they still found the promised land.
But that's, in a sense, that, I mean, the 400 years is the 400, he's talking about there is the 400 years in Egypt, when they are in the land that is not, they're aliens in the land that's not theirs. But then they're offered on that day, in the second part, on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I give this land, from Egypt to the great rivers Euphrates. It's a very large area. The land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, and so on. So he's giving a land that is not theirs. He's giving a land that belongs to somebody else. And that builds in a kind of tension and a conflict that persists to this day. And really needs very careful unpacking as to what that means, you know, to be given a land and to actually own a land. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Any questions? I think really is more the thing.
I have a question.
Mm.
Oh, sorry, someone else talking.
Oh no, go ahead, Patrick.
Okay. I'm curious because it seems like so before the Israelites were aliens in a land that is not theirs, you know, the whole time in Egypt, would there have been a relationship of land ownership over where they were? It seems like we start the story with this being an alien, but then what would have been before that?
Before that, I think you'd see people as nomadic, because Abraham begins his life over in Ur and he travels round into what is now Israel, then into Egypt himself. So they were kind of nomadic people before then. And in fact, you know, even between Andy, can you just mute for a while because we're getting feedback? Yeah, in between, you know, leaving Egypt and ending up in the promised land, there was 40 years of wandering around in the wilderness. They were used to the nomadic lifestyle. And this was, you know, giving them the chance to settle in another land. We'll look at this more next week, I think, you know, what that process of settlement was about. Okay. Any more comments or questions on that?
I'm just trying to get my head around this idea of land ownership, because in Eden, Adam didn't really own the land, did he?
No, he tilled the ground.
Exactly. So he was, can't think of a better word, but he was like a caretaker for the land. So I'm wondering why it's being emphasized, this idea of ownership now, and even whether that's well, does it in modern times, it doesn't seem like such a good thing, you know, particularly if you think of the conflict in Israel and Palestine, and you know, territorial claims and so on, that people claim that God gave it to them, and on both sides, for want of a better way of putting it, and it doesn't seem like it's brought much good.
No, it's really it's a very problematic kind of concept, and it, I mean, maybe we come to it exactly from modern kind of perspectives. You know, this is our country, you know, it belongs to us, and you have the English Channel as a defence against these refugees in boats, you know, or as you say, I mean, the situation in Palestine, Israel, Palestine, or the situation in Ukraine, where Putin can say, you know, this is part of ours, this is our empire, and always has been, you know, and who owns land and whatever is a really problematic concept, absolutely ingrained in us, you know, is what we do. And the question is the Bible responsible for that, and does it reinforce it, or actually does the Bible actually say something else that we're not seeing? What it is actually saying.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at, basically. Yes, spot on.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, what Neil was saying, because I think you distilled for me that was what's hidden in amongst that is conflict. It feels like there is a lot of conflict as well, but also in the latter part, it's something about the proportionality, that all of the different groups that will be in conflict. So it feels like there's an ongoing struggle all the way through.
And then maybe you're going to cover this one, but you know, we have alongside that then the fact that we are of the land, we are made of it. So how can we own something that we're made from? Is that possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think the other verse, which I haven't put in here, but is absolutely crucial, comes from Psalm 24, the first verse of Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's. I better look it up. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Let me just get it, because it's a great verse. And it's you know, a fundamental, everything, one of those verses, everything comes from it. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it, for he has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers. So we are of the earth, but the earth belongs to God, and everything belongs to God. The land belongs to God, and Israel belongs to God. It does not belong to the Israelites. It's been given on loan as a gift, you know, by God to Israel. But it's not there unconditionally. Let's have a look then at a passage.
I think Fajr has a hand up.
Oh, do you? Sorry. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I can
no
see
worries.
you've got a hand up.
Actually, what you said was exactly what I was going to say, Vaughn, is what I took away from that passage was God's way of saying, this is my land that I choose to do as I will, whether I distribute it or give it away or take it back, reclaim it, but this is my land. And then there's also something quite similar to what Jesus said in the New Testament, when he said something about he came to sort of almost divide families, brother and sisters, mothers from fathers, and or that sort of thing. So, or mothers and daughters and fathers and sons. And it's almost as if it's his right to divide as he sees fit, if it suits the purpose that he ultimately wants, which is people to worship him and to recognize him as Lord God Almighty.
That's right. That's right. Let's move on to this. This is also a really crucial passage from Isaiah. Somebody else will read it, Harley. I don't know who, but somebody else will read it. Oh, Neil. Oh, Catherine. Hey, there you go.
All right, the whole thing.
Yes, 10 verses.
Okay. All right. Let me sing for my beloved, my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? When I expected it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste, it shall not be pruned or hoed, and it shall be overgrown with briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry. You who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is room for no one but you, and you are left to live alone in the midst of the land. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but one bath, and a homer of seed shall yield a mere ephah.
So you sort of, I mean, this image of Israel as the vineyard is really, it's a very common image. I know you know lots of Jesus' parables are about vineyards. And it's a kind of clue whenever you see this in the Bible, that the vineyard is always Israel. But you see something really quite fundamental in that. I mean, I don't know what you pick out of it.
For me, it's I've lost it. Sorry.
Isaiah 5.
Yeah, no. I've got it. I mean, verse 8. Are you who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is room for no one but you, and you are left to live alone in the midst of the land? That's the one that leaps out to me personally. You know, sort of. I don't know if that does that mean is that sort of referring to acquisition, just constant acquisition of a piece of land until it's left just to whoever it is. I don't know, but that's the one that leapt out to me, at least. Just sort of, yeah, quite interesting.
I mean, if you could sort of take who add field to field. I mean, large scale industrial agriculture, has displaced, lots and lots of local small farms, small holdings, and is causing a huge amount of environmental damage. I mean, I think it is about, people who are misusing the land, and it's about giving Israel notice, that they're not there just to do whatever they like with the land. They are there they're there on condition, and the covenant that they have to be in that land is a covenant that is conditional upon upon justice. You know, he expected justice. Verse 7, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant plantings. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry. I mean, that's a really kind of powerful statement, isn't it? I mean, you're not, whoever you are, wherever you are, whichever country you're in, you're there on condition that, you know.
Yeah, you have a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
This section for me has the feeling, although I can't give you a melody, make one up straight away, has the feeling of being a song rather than a reading.
Yeah, it's a poem.
That's more true of the Psalms than it is of Isaiah.
No, it's a poem, absolutely, yeah.
It that verse reminds me of a quote I once heard. I don't remember the owner or who quoted it, but someone very, very rich. He's like, I don't want all the land in the world. I just want the ones that touch mine. So obviously that was a very poignant quote regarding greed. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could argue. I mean, this is you know, this is the Putin line, isn't it? I mean, he's just adding country to country. You know, I mean, they say if he'd been successful in Ukraine, he would have gone for Lithuania. You know, I mean, it's and colonialism as well. I mean, you know, you can see how empires are built on this acquisition of land. China, you know, wanting to reclaim Taiwan and so on and so on and so on, as well as you know, all the kind of, I guess you could say, the housing market as well in London, you know, and so on and so on.
And
I mean,
loads of land in Africa as well.
I'm sorry, say this again.
And they're buying up loads of land in Africa.
Absolutely. What China is doing in Africa now. Yeah.
But the flip side of that in the verse that Harley picked out is loneliness.
Yes.
You'll be on your own. And
Yeah.
so there's a very strong suggestion there. And, you know, the previous bit of that verse, house to house and field to field, you should be living alongside other people. That's what we're called to do. We're not called to be lonely, but it seems that the modern push, and you mentioned the housing market, the modern push is to live in these isolated little bits of land that have no connection with the people around you.
Gated communities, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. But even within those, so I mean, that's an interesting misuse of a word, isn't it? Community, because those gated places tend not to be communities. You know, they're not. They're just isolated little blocks where people are trying to reinforce their security. And I think the impact on mental resilience and health is massive. That in that loneliness, there, what have you got? You've got nothing but yourself to rely on. And that's not God's way. Obviously, isn't God's way. And
yeah,
there's a warning in that, isn't it? I mean, it's quite an obvious warning. He makes it, you know, it's there with the exclamation mark. This is where you end up. Some people might look at that and think, wow, that's great, but not recognize what that does to you.
I'm just looking at verse 9 because I live in Limehouse, just by Canary Wharf.
Yeah.
And it says, verse 9, the Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitants. I mean, Canary Wharf is absolutely full of skyscrapers, you know, full of blocks of houses owned by, you know, people from Saudi Arabia and China or whatever, but nobody living. They're just there as investments.
I think also the sort of imperialist mindset. I mean, I was actually talking with Vaughan today. I mean, Marx talks about this, I mean, in relation to capitalism, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole now. But it's sort of, you know, just the way in which that kind of imperialist mindset just destroys individual cultures and just leaves you as, leaves one common denominator, just and completely removes variety and expression from
Mhm,
the
mhm,
world, you know.
mhm, mhm.
And following on from what you were saying, Neil.
I think that's right. Yeah.
In the early 1990s, Vaughan, I lived very close to AUO. I was on the Isle of Dogs, and the whole area was being transformed. And it wasn't what anybody who lived there had ever known. It was different people coming in.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I moved in there in 1990s, and it was complete transformation. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
So we've got the story that the story so far is God has created the earth with good. He creates humanity out of the earth in this deep relationship, and then invites Israel into a deep relationship with a particular piece of land, although there is somehow or other tension built into that. And then this reminder that God gives, and the prophets give, is that that land has always been conditional. It's not there just for any purpose. It's there to be lived out in a particular way. Let's have another look at another passage. I love this passage, one of my favorites. Does somebody want to read it?
Shall I have a go at this
I think you should, Neil. This one is absolutely made for you.
Okay. All right. Later, the following events took place. Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel beside the palace of King Ahab of Samaria. And Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me a vineyard so that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it's near my house. I will give you a better vineyard for it, or if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money." But Naboth said to Ahab, "The Lord forbid that I should give you my ancestral inheritance." Ahab went home resentful and sullen because of what Naboth the Jezreelite had said to him, for he had said, "I will not give you my ancestral inheritance." He lay down on his bed, turned away his face, and would not eat. His wife Jezebel came to him and said, "Why are you so depressed that you will not eat?" He said to her, "Because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, 'Give me your vineyard for money, or else, if you prefer, I'll give you another vineyard for it.' But he answered, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" His wife Jezebel said to him, "Do you now govern Israel? Get up, eat some food, and be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal. She sent the letters to the elders and nobles who lived with Naboth in his city. She wrote in the letters, "Proclaim a fast and seat Naboth at the head of the assembly. Seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring a charge against him, saying, 'You have cursed God and the king.' Then take him out and stone him to death." The men of his city, the elders and nobles who lived in his city, did as Jezebel had sent word to them. Just as it was written in letters that she had sent to them, they proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth at the head of the assembly. The 2 scoundrels came in and sat opposite him, and the scoundrels brought a charge against Naboth in the presence of the people, saying, "Naboth cursed God and the king." So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, "Naboth has been stoned, he is dead." As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, "Go, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money, for Naboth is not alive, but dead." As soon as Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab set out to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, "Go down to meet King Ahab of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone to take possession. You shall say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, have you killed and also taken possession?' You shall say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, in the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, dogs will also lick up your blood.'" Ahab said to Elijah, "Have you found me, O my enemy?" He answered, "I have found you because you sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. I will bring disaster on you. I will consume you and will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free in Israel. And I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, son of Ahijah, because you have provoked me to anger and have caused Israel to sin. Also concerning Jezebel, the Lord said, the dog shall eat Jezebel within the bounds of Jezreel. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dog shall eat. And anyone of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the air shall eat. Indeed, there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord, urged on by his wife Jezebel. He acted most abominably in going after idols, as the Amorites had done, whom the Lord drove out before the Israelites. When Ahab heard those words, he tore his clothes and put sackcloth over his bare flesh. He fasted, lay in the sackcloth, and went about dejectedly. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he's humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days, I will bring the disaster on his house.
Wow, that's a heavy story.
He is such a toddler, isn't he?
Who Ahab?
Yes, just, lies down on his bed, faces the wall, says, oh, I'm just depressed now, so I can't have that. And then when he hears what's going to happen at the end, he looks dejected. And it all feels a little bit performative, to say the least, just to get his own way. And maybe I'm misjudging him, but it's my first impression.
Well, it's a story about a vineyard, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. And it's about possession, and it's about theft. And it's about theft of an ancestral land, which is, it's really, really interesting. What were you going to say, Andy? Sorry?
Well, I was going to ask if somebody might perhaps correct me here on something I was told throughout my school days, that the name Jezebel is always used to refer to a woman of loose morals.
Yeah, there's a lot of sexism around, but she was a pretty tough character.
My feeling too.
And isn't it interesting on the back of what we've just been talking about, that it's easier to ascribe to her her loose morality to be regarding sex or sexuality or whatever, but actually her loose morality here has nothing to do with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
But we don't want to talk about that
No.
because that might be more problematic.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I wonder this is clearly if you take, a lot of the stuff that's been going on with oil explorations, in Canada, has been about the intrusion into ancestral lands. Australia too. And there's the situation we looked at, we did a little webinar thing on it a while ago in Namibia, where an oil company is exploring into the Kabanga region, and displacing people, or would displace people's traditional ways of life, and so on and so on and so on. And there's something about Naboth, and his vineyard is seen as being sacred to him. It's ancestral. So you get the two sides of things here. Now, what is people's deep affinity to land and to particular land, which is what Naboth has done, and that the theft is to take away not just real estate, but the theft is to take away cultural identity, roots, and so on and so on and so on. And I think that's really quite a complex tension. It creates silence.
I'm just thinking that when land is ancestral, when it's been occupied by a community over a number of generations, there's an understanding of that land, and how to look after it, how to not exploit it or over demand too much of it, basically, because there's an understanding that if you do, then what you've got isn't any good anymore. And that seems to me to go a little bit back to that tension between being given land by God, which is God's land, but he gives it to you, but also being the tiller of that land, the person who encourages it to grow in the right way. And you know, when you don't have that connection with the land, well, then it isn't anything that you really care that much about. You're just going to exploit it for the best resources that you can get out of it, and then you end up destroying it because, you know, as Paul knows from what I've been doing recently, soil, I've been discovering more and more, the more you learn about soil, it is such a fragile but also powerful resource. It's so easy to destroy it, but if you let it do what it does, it's such an amazing resource. It can easily, if we didn't leach it with nitrogen, it would be so much better for us, because it actually would be much healthier, and it would probably produce crops better than what we currently get by sticking fertilizer in it, and less than 10% of which ever stays in the land anyway. But we do that when we don't really, it's not our land, we don't really care about it. You're just going to get as much crop out of it as we possibly can. And I've been thinking something I did discover, I'm sorry if I'm going off the point, but just want to mention this, that actually soil and crops work best when you keep trees as a part of the whole process. If you remove trees from land, you actually start to destroy the cycle of nutrients going back into soil. You know, and I've forgotten the name of the lady in Kenya who was such an advocate for planting forests. But you know, she's an example of that. But also, what have we done in this country? You look at fields now, there's like often one solitary tree standing in the middle, if you're lucky. But we just have these bare patches of land, and that soil's just being destroyed because we have no ancestral connection with it. We don't understand it. We haven't observed it. Sorry, I'll shut up.
No, it's true.
Was the person, were you thinking of Wangari Maathai?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thanks, Abigail. Yeah.
Your point there, particularly the beginning of the point you made, drew my mind to North America and the Native Americans, whose land was confiscated, and in what today's language might call segregation, they're given reservations.
Yeah.
You live in this bit, you just have this bit. And they were the ones who, for generations and generations, had known how to look after the land.
I know.
So yeah, I mean, there's something here about is the land sacred? You know, I mean, is there a sacredness about the land that we've lost? You know, is Ahab's, you know, and Jezebel's, you know, great sin, you know, was to steal land from somebody else. You know, I mean, that to steal the land rather than to cohabit in it or to negotiate entry into the land. You know, I mean,
I sometimes despair of the human race. Over many centuries, we've learned how to poison the air we breathe, the water we drink. We know how to blow up the world, and we probably will.
This is, I mean, just you know, thinking about where this is taking us. You know, I mean, all these questions seem to me to be really very, very contemporary questions that we're looking at, and that there's nothing new. I mean, this what we've covered so far is this relationship of humanity to soil and land, and maybe we've lost that. You know, living in an urban environment, we've lost that sense of, you know, just connection to to the land and our dependence on it, you know, and how do you restore that? How do you get that? I mean, we live with concrete and bricks, you know, and little patches of green here, there, and everywhere. Then you get this sense in the covenant to Abraham that the land is a gift. It's an inheritance. You know, it was Naboth's inheritance, not to be stolen and not to be taken away from anybody else. You get in Isaiah, you get this sense that, you know, if you are greedy and actually abuse the land by through injustice and an inequitable distribution of the land, you know, then you fail God, you know, and so, you know, I mean, there is this sense of Israel as the vineyard, but to what extent do we just have to look at that as a sort of historical relationship, or do we have to think about what does it mean to be in our own vineyard? You know, where is the land that we have a relationship to, and how do you feel that? And given our sort of fragmented and perhaps quite rootless, you know, I mean, I look around the screen here, you know, and where are we all in connection to particular lands? I mean, London is not my land, you know, and we're in a different kind of relationship. But the questions of possession and ownership is more than just who you're paying your mortgage to, you know, or who you pay rent to. The question of land and ownership is about identity and belonging. And what the Bible seems to be saying is, you know, actually that relationship is something that is very precious and has to be held on to. But it cannot be held on to at the expense of other people. And it cannot be held on to at the expense of justice. And it cannot be something that you take or steal. You know, it's got to be something that's got to be negotiated and so on. I mean, they're big questions. And to me, that they are, I mean, what they're not saying is, I'm sure it's not saying is, everybody just has the right to the land that they're born in, you know, that actually no, land is, that relationship now is quite different. I don't know what I'm saying now.
I think as ever, the truth is always hard to find, but it's always in tension. And I think you've hit the tension. You've hit the nail of tension on the head tonight. There you got it, French. In that it's about the earth being God's. It's His, but He gives it to us. But in the giving to us, we misunderstand God's intention, which is not that therefore, okay, I've given it to you and I'm off, do what you like with it. He's given it to us because He trusts us to do the right thing with it. And some might regard that as foolish, you know. I concur with what Andy said. It's, you know, at times you look at the world and you just despair. But then I was going through my mind as you were talking, Vaughan, is you know, Brick Lane and that area around East London, not far away from where you live, in how many communities have passed through that area and have come to know it and built upon what communities have done before them, and actually how vibrant an area it is. And you know, to me, in the sense, it's not perfect, of course it's not, but there is a lesson in that the communities almost seem to have had an understanding that they were passing through that area, but in the time that they were there, it needed to be treasured and tended. and they worked in the particular ways they did. You know, the Huguenots did, and then you had the Jewish community. They have a Bengali community, and you know there was an Irish community at one point as well. And it's layers upon layers upon layers of communities, but they've all treasured that area and passed it on. It's not been theirs to keep. It's not a perfect model, of course it isn't. There's lots of flaws in what I'm saying, but there is some kind of healthy understanding. And I've lived in lots of places in my life, but what I love is getting to know the different places where I live, and seeing what the people who've lived there for a long time understand about their place.
That's really nice way. I mean, it's an inheritance, but an inheritance that you contribute to, and you add to the inheritance for the next generation. Yeah.
To add a little bit to that comment, if I may. I've met people that were very, very old by then, young children at the time, who were participants in the Battle of Cable Street, telling the fascists they shall not pass. And they didn't pass. The police told them to go and march somewhere else. And they couldn't be held together.
Are we going away with more questions than answers?
Yeah, but that's good.
Oh,
Well, setting up the series, you know, you need or a few.
Yeah, I think next week I want to look at the Israel-Palestine question in relationship to this, you know, because it's a tough question for Christians, because it's a very, very tough question, because we're caught between our shame and our guilt for the Holocaust, and you know, our concern for the behavior of Israel in relationship to Palestine. And you know, the Bible is there. The Bible talks about occupation and possession, and you know, Israel was chosen by the Zionists because of the historic connection, and so it's a very important, major, contemporary political issue, which has got its roots in the scripture that we believe in and call the Word of God. So we'll try and unravel that one next week.